My own family pushed me into a lake and left me to die. I survived, uncovered the truth, and discovered my father's inheritance and secrets. In the end, I got justice against them and reclaimed my life, my strength, and my freedom. This is my story that will shake you. I always believed that family means home, warmth, protection, a place where you can breathe without fear. But I was wrong. My name is Amelia Carter, and this is the story of the day my own family tried to erase me from this world. Growing up, I always felt like a guest in my own house. My father, Richard Carter, loved me in his own distant way, but after my mother died, he remarried, and that changed everything. My stepmother, Laura, never liked me. She hid her bitterness behind polite smiles, but her eyes, they always looked at me like I was something unwanted, something that should have never existed. When I turned 17, things got worse. The house was always loud with arguments, whispered conversations that would suddenly stop when I walked in, doors shut in my face, lies told softly but poisoned with intent. My cousins, Daniel and Chloe, moved in with us early that year. They pretended to be kind when Dad was around, but when we were alone, they made sure I never forgot how unwelcome I was. And then came the day that destroyed whatever little faith I had left. Dad walked into the living room with excitement in his voice. "We're going to the lake house this weekend," he announced. "A family trip, family." The words sounded heavy, almost sarcastic. Laura flashed her perfect smile and squeezed my shoulder a little too tightly. "It'll be good for all of us, Amelia. Fresh air, peace. Maybe you'll learn how to behave," I didn't answer. I was used to staying quiet. Speaking only made things worse. The next morning, we drove to the Carter Lake House, an old wooden property built beside a deep, silent lake in the middle of the woods. It was beautiful, yes, but isolated. The nearest town was 30 minutes away. No neighbors, no cameras, no help. When we arrived, the air smelled of pine and cold water. The lake was still, like a giant mirror holding secrets beneath its surface. Dad unloaded bags, Daniel and Chloe laughed loudly about something, and Laura walked around with her usual controlling gaze. I tried to focus on the peaceful side of things. Maybe this trip would actually calm everyone down, but deep inside, something felt wrong. Later that afternoon, Dad went inside the house to take a phone call. Laura told Daniel and Chloe to take me to the pier. Her voice wasn't a request. It was an order. I followed them anyway. I always followed. That was my mistake. The pier stretched out into the lake like a long wooden finger pointing into the dark water. I walked to the edge and looked down. My reflection stared back at me, rippling slightly with the small movement of the water. The wind was cold, but the silence was colder. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned halfway, just enough to see Daniel standing too close. "What?" Before I could finish, a hard shove hit my back. My feet slipped. My arms flailed. And then I was falling. The water was shockingly cold, like knives against my skin. My breath ripped out of my chest. I tried to swim upward, but before my head could break the surface, something or someone shoved me down again. A hand. A real hand. Strong and deliberate. I panicked. My heart pounded in my ears. My lungs screamed for air. I kicked upward with every bit of strength I had, but the water swallowed me again and again. I finally broke the surface, gasping, coughing, eyes burning. I can't swim." My voice was shaking, weak, and cracking with fear. That's when I heard them above me. The voices of the people I trusted once. Daniel, Chloe, and Laura. No panic. No surprise. Just silence. They stood on the pier and stared at me like I was nothing. I tried to move closer to the edge, but Chloe leaned forward, her voice calm and cold. "Don't bother." Daniel's hands rested on the railing. He wasn't going to pull me out. He was waiting for me to stop trying. And then Laura stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't scream. She spoke with the same soft tone she used when answering the phone or greeting a neighbor. Let her sink. That moment killed everything inside me. My arms felt weak, my legs heavy. I couldn't believe what was happening. I wasn't dreaming. They wanted me gone. They wanted my life to end right there in that silent lake, where no one could hear me. I screamed for my father, but my voice drowned in the open air. The water pulled at me, colder and heavier with every second. I tried to float, but exhaustion dragged me down. My fingers numbed. My breath fled my body. My vision blurred blue and black. Right before I slipped under again, I looked up one last time, hoping, praying that someone would help me. But they were already turning away, walking back toward the lake house, leaving me to die. And in that moment, I understood something painful and terrifying. This wasn't an accident. My family didn't want me. My family wanted me gone, forever. Water has a strange sound when you're sinking. It's quiet, but loud at the same time, like the world is fading and your heartbeat is the only thing left. As I slipped beneath the surface, everything slowed. My arms stopped fighting. My legs stopped kicking. My lungs burned for air until the pain felt distant, almost gentle. I wasn't screaming anymore. I couldn't. The last thing I saw through the rippling water was 3 silhouettes on the pier, walking away as if they had simply finished a chore. I let the darkness take me, but death didn't come. Something grabbed my wrist. At first, I thought it was the lake pulling me deeper, but then a strong arm wrapped around my chest and lifted me upward. Water exploded past my face as I was dragged to the surface. The air tasted sharp and painful, but it was life. A voice shouted, rough, unfamiliar, "Stay awake. Don't close your eyes." I coughed, choked, and gasped, too weak to speak, too shocked to understand. The man pulled me through the freezing water and pushed me onto the muddy shoreline. My body shook uncontrollably. My fingers were pale and numb. I curled onto my side, coughing out lake water while the world spun in circles. He knelt beside me, breathless but alert. "You're alive. Stay with me." I blinked until his face came into focus. He wasn't family. He wasn't anyone I had ever seen. Mid-30s, dark hair, athletic build, wearing a security uniform. "I saw you fall," he said, voice urgent. "Are you hurt?" "Fall." He thought I fell. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. They pushed me. His expression changed instantly. Calm turned into sharp suspicion. "Who pushed you?" I pointed weakly toward the pier, but the wood was empty now, still and innocent looking, like nothing had happened. "They were right there," I whispered. He looked toward the lake house. The lights were on inside. Shadows moved across the windows. They were watching. They knew I survived. He pulled a blanket from his patrol bag and wrapped it around me. "My name's Ethan Ward," he said. "I work security for the private cabins on the other side of the lake." I heard yelling. No one yelled to save me. No one called for help. The yelling was me. I could feel tears burning the back of my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not in front of a stranger. Not after what my family just did. Ethan noticed my shivering and helped me stand. I could barely keep my balance. "You need a hospital," he said. "You're hypothermic. Hospital." No, my family would spin a story before I even arrived. An accident. A clumsy fall. Poor Amelia slipped, and I would look crazy if I said they tried to kill me. Because who believes a daughter when she says her family wanted her dead? Ethan studied my face like he was reading my thoughts. "Did someone try to hurt you?" My throat tightened. The truth was too heavy to say. Instead, I whispered, "Please, just don't take me back there." He didn't ask another question. He just nodded and helped me into his truck. The heater blasted warm air against my frozen skin. My wet clothes stuck to my body. Every breath hurt. As we drove, the darkness outside felt endless. The trees blurred past the windows, tall and silent, like they were hiding the secrets of that lake. Ethan glanced at me. "Do you want to call someone? A friend? Police?" I stared at my shaking hands. "I don't have anyone." It felt pathetic to say, but it was true. My whole world was a lie built around a family that didn't want me. He drove for almost 15 minutes before pulling up to a small medical clinic near town. The sign said St. Clair Urgent Care, glowing softly in the night. Inside, the nurses rushed toward me. They wrapped me in warm towels, checked my breathing, gave me oxygen, and examined my bruised ribs. I was exhausted, numb, and shaking from more than the cold. 2 hours passed before I felt stable enough to sit up on my own. A nurse asked politely, "Do we need to contact your family?" I stared at her for a long moment. No. One word. Cold. Final. Ethan waited in the hallway while the nurses finished. When I finally stepped out, wearing dry scrubs they had given me, he stood up from the chair. "You still shaking?" "A little. Do you want to file a report?" "I can call a sheriff." For a second, I imagined it. Cops arriving at the lake house, flashing lights, handcuffs. But my family was smart. They would lie. They would smile. They would turn the world against me. And if the sheriff believed them instead of me, I'd go back to that house, back to the people who wanted me gone. No, I said quietly. Not yet. Ethan nodded like he understood more than I said. Then you're not going back there. Get in the truck. When we left the clinic parking lot, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A black SUV, parked across the street. Headlights off. Engine running. I knew that car, my family's. They came looking for my body, or to finish what they started. Ethan noticed them too. Friends of yours? No, I whispered. My family. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Okay, he said calmly. Then we're not going toward them. We'll take another road. The SUV didn't move, but I could feel eyes watching us. We drove away into the night. I didn't look back. But deep inside, I knew one thing. This wasn't over. They failed tonight, and that made me more dangerous than ever. Sleep didn't come that night. Ethan let me stay in a spare cabin at the security station. Small, quiet, with a single bed and a lock on the door. For the first time in years, I felt safe enough to breathe. But my mind wouldn't rest. I kept hearing her voice. Let her sink. No apology. No hesitation. My stepmother said it like she was telling someone to close a window. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my life with that family. Every insult. Every cold stare. Every time I was treated like a burden instead of a daughter. Why did they hate me so much? Hate didn't explain everything. Hate pushes people away, but it doesn't make them attempt murder. There had to be a reason. Before sunrise, I slipped out of bed and made a decision. I needed answers, real ones. At 6 a.m., Ethan knocked on the door with 2 cups of hot coffee. You slept at all? He asked. Not really. He handed me a cup. The sheriff is going to want a statement eventually. I can't go to the sheriff, I whispered. Not until I know why they did it. He studied me for a long moment. You think there's more to this? I know there is. Because deep down, I had always felt it. My family didn't just dislike me. They wanted something from me. Or more specifically, without me, I pulled in a shaking breath. I need to go back to the house. Ethan set his coffee down slowly. Amelia, that's where they tried to kill you. I won't talk to them, I said. I just need to get into my father's office. His expression darkened. You think he's involved? My stomach twisted. I didn't want to believe that. But Dad wasn't there when I was drowning. And he wasn't looking for me at the hospital. His SUV was outside the clinic. But he never came inside. I don't know, I answered. But I need the truth. Ethan exhaled sharply, then nodded once. Fine. If you're going, I'm going with you, back to the house. We took a dirt road along the edge of the lake, staying far from where the SUV had been parked. My hands were shaking the whole drive, but I kept my voice steady. When we reached the lake house, the front porch light was still on. The windows were dark. No movement, either they were asleep or waiting. Ethan parked behind a shed where the truck couldn't be seen from the house. He looked at me, in and out. No talking to anyone. I nodded, heart pounding. We moved quietly across the yard. The morning air smelled like damp wood and lake water. Every step felt like walking toward a ghost. The back door was unlocked. My family always assumed I wouldn't disobey them. They were wrong. Inside, the house felt too quiet. Cabinets closed. Dishes washed. Like nothing terrible had happened here just hours ago. I walked straight toward my father's office, an oak door at the end of the hallway. When I turned the handle, it opened easily, and on his desk. Papers were scattered everywhere, like someone had left in a rush. Ethan stood guard at the door while I searched. Bills, insurance documents, property deeds. Then I found something that made my blood freeze, a file labeled with my mother's name. Helen Carter, estate and guardianship. My heart hammered. I sat down and opened it with shaking hands. Inside were my mother's original will, her life insurance policy, and a handwritten note, signed by her lawyer. I whispered the words as I read them. In the event of my death, all assets, savings, investments, and property are to be transferred to my daughter, Amelia Carter. All assets. All property, everything, not to my father. Not to my stepmother. Not to the family, to me, my breath. Caught in my throat, my mother left me everything, and someone hid. The document was dated 2 months before my mother died. A cold realization sank into my bones. She didn't die naturally. Someone planned ahead. My hands trembled as I flipped to the next page. There was a second document stamped by a court. It said, "Guardianship of minor Amelia Carter, granted to Richard Carter on condition of financial protection of estate until child reaches age 25. Which meant, when I turned 25, my inheritance would legally become mine. I was 24. 1 year left. 1 year until millions of dollars. Property, investments, all transferred into my name. That's why I was still alive. They needed me to stay alive until the paperwork cleared. But last night, something must have changed. Ethan spoke quietly behind me. Your mother was wealthy? She owned the Carter marketing firm before my father took over, I whispered. Everyone thinks he built it. He didn't. She did. Her name is on everything. Ethan rested a hand on the desk. And when you turn 25, it all becomes mine. A noise echoed from down the hallway. Floorboard, heavy footsteps. Ethan's eyes snapped toward the door. Someone's awake, he whispered. I shoved the documents into my bag and closed the drawer silently. Another step. Then another, coming closer. Ethan grabbed my wrist. Back door. Now. We moved quickly down the hallway, but before we reached the kitchen, a silhouette appeared at the end of the corridor. My father. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't confused. He wasn't relieved I was alive. He just stared, calm, expressionless. Then he said in a voice I didn't recognize, "You were supposed to stay gone, Amelia." My breath turned to ice. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't someone else's plan. My father was part of it. Ethan stepped in front of me, his voice cold and steady. Don't move. Sir. My father's eyes shifted to Ethan, measuring him, thinking. Then a small, cruel smile touched his lips. You shouldn't have come back. The hallway felt tighter. The air felt thinner, and at that moment I knew. The night wasn't the end, it was the beginning. My father's words hung in the air like smoke. You were supposed to stay gone. For a moment I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't believe that the man who once read bedtime stories to me was now the same man whose eyes were colder than the lake that nearly swallowed me. Ethan's arm tightened protectively in front of me. His stance was firm, but his voice stayed even. Sir, we don't want trouble. We're leaving. Dad took one slow step forward. You shouldn't have brought her here, he said, his tone eerily calm. You have no idea what you've stepped into. Try me, Ethan replied. Dad smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She doesn't belong here anymore. And neither do you. He moved a hand behind his back. Something glinted under his jacket. A gun. Before he could pull it out, Ethan shoved me toward the kitchen. Run! Everything exploded into motion. The rush of footsteps, the crack of wood, my father shouting my name. I sprinted toward the back door, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Ethan stayed behind, blocking him. I burst out into the freezing dawn air, my bare feet hitting the cold ground as I ran through the wet grass. The lake reflected the pink glow of sunrise, peaceful and indifferent to the chaos behind me. Gunfire shattered the silence. One shot. Then two. I froze. Ethan! No answer. Another shot echoed through the trees. I forced myself to move, tearing down the narrow path that led toward the main road. Branches cut into my skin, but I didn't stop. My lungs burned, my legs shook, but all I could think was, keep moving, Amelia. Don't stop. I ran until my body gave up. By the time I reached the edge of the forest, I collapsed behind a large rock. I could still see the lake house in the distance, smoke rising from its chimney. Everything looked so normal, yet my entire life had just imploded. Minutes passed, maybe more. I didn't know. Then I heard a sound, footsteps crunching on the gravel. I held my breath, but it wasn't my father, it was Ethan. He was limping, blood seeping from a graze on his shoulder, but alive. He dropped beside me, breathing hard, his eyes alert. You're okay, I whispered. Barely, he muttered, pressing a cloth against his wound. Your father's a bad shot. A weak laugh escaped my throat, half shock, half relief. You shouldn't have come for me. Yeah, well, he said, wincing. You're not the only one they underestimated. We stayed hidden until the light grew stronger. I didn't know what to do next. Going to the police felt useless now. My father had money, influence, and a network of people who would make sure the story became something else entirely. Then I remembered the bag slung across my shoulder, the documents I'd taken from the office. I found something, I said. We spread the papers on the ground. Ethan scanned through the legal documents, the signatures, and the dates. His jaw clenched. This isn't just inheritance, he said. There are offshore accounts in your name. Investments tied to Carter Marketing. Do you see this? He pointed to a series of wire transfers. Your mother moved millions before she died. My heart stopped. Why would she do that? Maybe she knew something, Ethan said. Maybe she knew someone would come for it. He handed me a folded piece of paper I hadn't noticed before. It was wedged between 2 pages of the will. The ink was faded, the handwriting delicate and slanted. It was my mother's handwriting. If you ever read this, Amelia, then they've already done what I feared. Trust no one with the Carter name. Not even your father. The truth is in the walls. The walls? I stared at the words, confusion mixing with fear. What does that mean? I asked. Ethan frowned. Could be literal. Hidden compartments, maybe. There's a safe, I whispered. Behind the painting in the library. He nodded. Then that's where we're going next. Back into the lion's den. It was nearly evening when we returned to the lake house. The windows were dark now. The air was heavy with tension. We moved like shadows, slipping through the side door. The smell of coffee and gunpowder lingered faintly in the air. My father was nowhere in sight. Ethan led me down the hallway, flashlight low and silent. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like thunder to my nerves. In the library, the large portrait of my grandparents hung above the fireplace, the same one I'd seen my father stare at countless times. I climbed onto the small chair beneath it and lifted the frame. Sure enough, behind it was a small digital safe embedded in the wall. Ethan tilted his head. Do you know the code? I hesitated. Then I remembered something my mother always said to me as a child. Never forget your first sunrise. I typed the date of my birth. The lock clicked open. Inside were old tapes, not digital files, but actual cassette tapes, neatly labeled with dates. The earliest one was from 15 years ago, the year my mother died. Ethan found a small tape recorder on the desk. He inserted the first tape and pressed play. At first, it was just static. Then, her voice, my mother's. If anyone finds this, it means I didn't survive the accident. I don't trust Richard anymore. He's been meeting with someone named Laura. I think they're planning to take control of my company and my life insurance. If something happens to me, promise me you'll protect Amelia. My hand flew to my mouth. I could barely breathe. Ethan pressed pause. Laura was your stepmother, right? I nodded numbly. Tears blurred my vision. He hit play again. If Richard ever gets custody, he'll wait until Amelia is old enough for the inheritance to transfer. And then, I don't think she'll make it past 25. The tape clicked off. I sat there frozen, shaking. So it was never just hate. It was premeditated. A plan 15 years in the making. Ethan met my eyes, voice low but steady. We take this to the police. They can't bury this kind of evidence. Before I could respond, a sound broke through the silence. A floorboard creaked just outside the door, then my father's voice. You should have stayed gone. Amelia. The lights flickered. The door began to open. I used to believe that surviving them was enough. That breathing, waking up, and staying alive meant I had won. But the truth was, I wasn't safe. Not even after I escaped the lake. Not after I found the mysterious man who saved me. And not after I learned the secret they tried so hard to bury. Because people who try to erase you don't stop the first time. They try again, and again, and again. The night I reached the cabin in the woods, my clothes were soaked, my body shivering, my feet bruised from running barefoot over stones and broken branches. I didn't trust anyone, not even the man who pulled me from the water. He drove slowly, his eyes shifting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, as if he expected someone to follow us. When we reached the cabin, he handed me a blanket, set logs in a fireplace, and lit the flame. The warmth felt unreal. So, he finally said, "You're Amelia Carter." His voice wasn't soft, but it wasn't cruel either. It felt like a statement, like he already knew exactly who I was. Yes, I whispered. My throat felt tight. Who are you? My name is Ethan Blake, he replied. I worked with your father. My breath stopped. Worked. With my father? I stared at him. His jacket, his boots, his serious eyes, none of this felt like a coincidence. My father? I asked. You knew him? He hesitated, and the silence stretched in the air like something heavy and dangerous. Then he said the words that changed everything. I didn't just know him. I was the man he hired to protect you. My whole body froze. Protect me? From what? From who? Ethan sat across from me, leaned forward, and spoke slowly, like each word carried weight. Your father wasn't the monster you think he was. He didn't plan for you to die. He tried to save you. My heart thundered inside my chest. What are you talking about? I whispered. They pushed me. They tried to kill me. The entire family! Ethan shook his head. Laura isn't your stepmother, Amelia. She's not even your father's wife. My mind went blank. What? What do you mean? He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, old, wrinkled, with my father's handwriting on it. Before he disappeared, Ethan said, your father gave me this and said, if anything happens to me, protect my daughter. My hands trembled as I held the envelope. Inside was a letter, written in my father's voice. Amelia, if you are reading this, it means I failed to keep them away. You are not safe with them, and you never were. Trust Ethan, he will get you out. My breath broke. The man I hated. The man I believed abandoned me. The man I thought turned his back on me. He had been trying to save me all along. Tears burned my eyes, but before they fell, headlights swept across the cabin window. A car. No, not just a car. 2. Ethan stood instantly. His voice dropped to a whisper. They found us. Panic surged through me. My knees weakened. Are they here to kill me? I asked. Ethan didn't answer. He didn't have to. He handed me a flashlight and pointed to the back door. There's a path through the woods. Follow it. Don't stop. Do not look back. But I didn't move. Not this time. All my life, I ran. Ran from the shouting, the threats, the lies, the twisted smiles. But that night, something inside me changed. No, I said quietly. I'm not running anymore. Ethan looked at me. Really looked. Not like a weak girl. Not like a victim. Like someone who deserved to fight back. A shadow moved across the window. Someone was outside. My heart slammed against my ribs, but I stood tall. I want the truth, I whispered. All of it. Ethan pulled a small recorder from his pocket and pressed play. My blood turned cold. Laura's voice filled the room. We get rid of her. We get everything. Her voice was calm. Almost bored, Daniel's voice followed. No cops, no questions. She falls, she drowns, and everyone thinks it's an accident. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in years, my father. You touch her again? I swear. A sharp sound, a struggle. My father is yelling, and then silence. The recorder clicked off. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. They killed him, I whispered. They killed my father, Ethan nodded. And now, he said, they want to finish what they started. Before I could speak, the door handle shook violently. Someone was trying to break in. Ethan stepped forward. Calm and steady. Get behind me. The wood cracked. The lock snapped, and the door flew open. Laura stepped inside, smiling. Dry, elegant, like she hadn't just hunted me through the forest. Hello. Amelia, she said softly. I told you once. You never belonged in this family. My hands curled into fists. For the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt fire. I stepped forward, my voice steady even though my heart was racing. You're right, I said. I don't belong to you. I lifted the recorder and pressed play. Laura's smile shattered. Ethan moved. Everything exploded into chaos. Shouting, footsteps, the cabin shaking with struggle and fear. But one thing was certain. I wasn't going to drown this time. I wasn't going to disappear. Tonight, I stopped running. Tonight, I fought back. I never imagined I'd see my mother's face again. Not in person, not alive. But that night, in the chaos of the cabin, her presence was everywhere. In her words, on the tapes, in the documents she left behind, and in the way the truth finally revealed itself. Laura's face twisted in anger as she realized the recorder was in my hands. You have no idea what you're doing, she hissed, moving toward me. I stood my ground. I wasn't trembling anymore. I wasn't the scared girl by the lake. I know exactly what I'm doing, I said, my voice calm, cutting through the tension like a knife. I know what you and Daniel and Chloe planned. I know you tried to kill me, and I know why, Laura faltered, and I could see cracks forming in her perfect mask. She opened her mouth to speak, but Ethan cut in, stepping between us. "Don't," he warned. "It's over." I took a deep breath, holding the envelope my father had entrusted to Ethan. The letters, the tapes, the legal documents, they all told the same story. My father wasn't my enemy. He had tried to protect me, but he was trapped, threatened, and silenced before he could act. The true mastermind was Laura, and behind her, my father's greed had been manipulated by forces I had never suspected. I pressed play on another tape, my hands steady despite the tension. Laura's voice filled the cabin again. This time it was a confession. "Richard will never stop me. He thinks he can protect Amelia, but he doesn't know the full plan. She will never inherit anything if I make sure of it. I will control the Carter fortune, and no one, especially not that girl, will stand in my way." My blood ran cold. All this time they had lied, hidden, manipulated, and even tried to drown me, just to secure what my mother had built. The inheritance, the company, the money, it was never about me. It was about power, and they had underestimated me. Laura stepped closer, her face pale now, her composure faltering. "You don't understand," she said. "Everything I did to survive. To protect the family fortune." I shook my head, my eyes locked on hers. "Protect? You tried to erase me. You tried to murder your own family member. That's not protection, it's obsession." Her lips trembled, but she didn't move. She knew I was right. Then Ethan leaned in, holding the envelope. "We have proof," he said firmly. "All of it. Financial records, correspondence, tapes, legal documents. You can't deny it. The police will believe us." For the first time, I felt the power shift. The fear I had carried for years started to fade. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the one holding the evidence, the one who could finally expose the truth. Laura's eyes darted around the room, realizing her options were gone. She could fight physically, but the law would crush her once the authorities arrived. She could run, but we had the documents, the evidence of every lie, every plan, every attempt to harm me. Then I remembered the most important piece. The letter my mother had left. The one who had guided me through the maze of deceit. "Trust no one with the Carter name. Not even your father. Protect yourself, Amelia. You are stronger than they know." I looked at Ethan, who nodded, understanding exactly what needed to be done. I pressed play on the last tape, the one that my mother had recorded herself before she died. "If you are hearing this, Amelia, know that I loved you. Know that your family is not what it seems. Fight, survive, and take what is yours. They tried to erase you, but you are stronger than they ever imagined." I held the recorder tightly, feeling a surge of strength that I had never felt before. All the years of fear, pain, and betrayal condensed into one clear realization. I was not a victim. I had survived. I had escaped. And now I would take control of my own life. Laura's shoulders sagged as the sound of sirens began in the distance. Someone had called the authorities. Ethan, probably, knowing they wouldn't leave without confirmation that the law would intervene. The door burst open. Flashing lights illuminated the cabin, and officers moved in swiftly, cuffing Laura and the others who had arrived to enforce her plans. I stepped back, watching the people who had haunted my life for years finally face the consequences. One officer approached, holding a notepad. "Are you Amelia Carter?" he asked. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "You're safe now," he assured me. "We have everything under control." I nodded, relief washing over me, but inside I felt something stronger than relief. I felt empowerment. For the first time, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't running. I wasn't trembling. I was alive. And I was free. As I stepped outside into the night, the cool air filling my lungs, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the lake, the betrayal, the near death, the hidden tapes, and the courage it took to confront the truth, and I realized something important. Surviving isn't just about staying alive. Surviving is about reclaiming your life, your power, and your story. And no one, not even your own family, can take that away from you once you decide to fight. That night, as the police led Laura and her accomplices into the flashing lights, I promised myself one thing. I would never let anyone control my life again. I would never let fear define me. I would never let betrayal silence me. And in that moment, I felt the weight of the past lift, replaced by the clarity of my own strength. I had survived. And now, I would live. The night had finally ended. The flashing red and blue lights faded as Laura, Daniel, and Chloe were escorted into police cars, handcuffed, their faces masks of anger, shock, and fear. They had underestimated me. They had planned my death, schemed for my inheritance, and treated me like a ghost that could be erased. But they had failed. I stood outside the cabin, the cold wind on my face, the forest around me quiet except for the distant sounds of sirens fading into the night. My heart was still pounding, my hands still trembling, but now the trembling was not from fear. It was from the raw, overwhelming power of survival. I thought about the lake, about the water pulling me under, about the moment I had believed my own family wanted me dead. I had never felt so betrayed, so abandoned, and so alone, and yet here I was. Alive, whole, stronger than they ever imagined. Ethan was beside me, silent, letting me take in the night. I didn't need words. He had saved me, guided me, and more importantly, believed in me when no one else did. But this night, this moment wasn't about him. It was about reclaiming what was mine. I pulled out the envelopes my father had left, the tapes, the documents, every piece of evidence proving the truth. The authorities had them now. My family couldn't lie, couldn't manipulate, couldn't escape the law. They had finally been exposed for who they really were: greedy, cruel, and dangerous. I took a deep breath. The sky was clear now, the stars shimmering above the lake like silent witnesses. For years, I had searched for justice, for validation, for someone to see me, not as a failure, not as a burden, but as the person I truly was. And now, it was mine. I walked toward the edge of the lake. The water was calm, almost peaceful, reflecting the moonlight like a mirror. I knelt down and touched the surface, remembering the cold, the terror, the moment I had thought I would never breathe again. And then I smiled. I survived. I fought. I reclaimed everything they had tried to take from me. Not just my inheritance, but my dignity, my power, my story. The weeks that followed were surreal. Court hearings, testimonies, and police investigations confirmed everything I had discovered. Laura and the others were convicted of multiple crimes: conspiracy, attempted murder, financial fraud, and abuse of trust. Daniel and Chloe pleaded guilty after realizing the overwhelming evidence against them. Justice, at last, had been served. I testified, every word steady, clear, and unflinching. I told the court about the lake, the shoves, the near drowning, and the betrayal I had endured for years. I spoke of the financial deception, the manipulation, and the cruelty. I spoke of survival, not just mine, but the power of refusing to be erased. When the judge pronounced the verdicts, a sense of peace washed over me. Guilty, every one of them. Sentenced to years behind bars. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without fear. But even as justice was served, I realized that true freedom wasn't about revenge or money. It wasn't about seeing them punished. It was about reclaiming myself. I left the courtroom, walking out into the sunlight, feeling the warmth on my skin for the first time in years without fear. The world felt alive, open, full of possibilities I had never allowed myself to see. I returned to my life, but not the old life. I built a new one, a life where I set the rules, where I was safe, where I was loved not by those who claimed to be family, but by myself and the few who truly cared. I focused on my career, my passions, and my own growth. I traveled, I explored, I laughed again, and with every step I reminded myself that survival was not enough. I had to live, fully, completely. And one evening, standing on the balcony of my new apartment overlooking the city lights, I whispered to the wind, "I am here. I am alive. I am not afraid. No one can erase me. No one can control me. This is my life, and I will live it on my terms." The past had tried to crush me. The past had tried to drown me in water and betrayal. But I had fought back. I had survived the darkness, faced the monsters, and stepped into the light. I had reclaimed my name, my power, my life, and I would never let it go again, because I learned something important that night, and I carry it with me every day. The people who try to erase you are not your measure. Your strength, your courage, and your will to survive, that is your story. And no one, no matter how close, can ever take that away. I am Amelia Carter. I am alive, and I am unstoppable.